So, how do we do it? Jamie and I have been talking for an hour about this. Hopefully we have your attention. So how do we do it? How did Jamie and I do it in Family Constellations? How do we actually lead a person through this? I had mentioned earlier, it's by going through the 4 levels of consciousness. So again, most schools of philosophy, most schools of psychology, most schools of spiritual consciousness all adhere to the same thing, that every human being has 4 levels of consciousness. Now they can be divided, and there's many schools of thought, there's all the different levels of chakras, and there's all the different levels of nuances of consciousness. But ultimately, every human being, every one of us sitting here, every one of your clients, every person on the earth has a physical consciousness, physical form, mental consciousness, emotional consciousness, and spiritual consciousness. We call it mental level, emotional level, spiritual level. Some schools of thought call it planes, the mental plane, the emotional plane, the spiritual plane. Others call it bodies, the mental body, the emotional body, the spiritual body. You can choose whatever you want. But every constellation starts out on the physical level, create the field. You physically enter the field. You've physically chosen to be here. You've physically chosen to do your personal work. The next thing that happens is when you're standing across from a representative or you're in the field, you're mentally going through all the thoughts and ideas. The same way when Jamie took you a few minutes ago into what are the things that happened in your family lineage? What are some of these initiations? It was a mental process. You mentally thought about it. When I stand across from a representative from my father, I mentally recollect all the things that my father was, images, thoughts, memories. But then, when I enter into the field and I come closer, my emotional consciousness gets activated. So we go from the mind, mentally, to the heart, to the emotional center. And we see this in our bodies. Mental, emotional, deeper inside, spiritual. So the emotional level of consciousness, each one of these is a bridge to the next. The emotional level is the bridge, the portal, the gateway into the spiritual level, into the soul level. So we all know from family constellations and doing constellations, there's that emotional thing that happens at a certain point. And then after the emotional catharsis, after the breakthrough, there's the stillness, the silence, which is why a few minutes ago I talked about it's important when you get to the spiritual level, the soul level, that there's quiet. It's in that still space that the spiritual understanding comes up from the inside. So in constellations, Jamie and I always look that we're leading a client and the whole group, and as representatives, if you know this, not just as a facilitator, but as a representative, if you understand the levels of consciousness, you can understand where a constellation goes. To tie in the soul, it goes from the individual to the family to the collective. It goes from the mental level to the emotional level to the spiritual level.